Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or a passionate member of your faith community, this podcast is designed to challenge, inspire, and equip you with the tools you need for impactful ministry.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. I am co-host of Future Christian, and today I am so pleased to be joined by my co-host, Loren Richmond Jr. Hi, Loren.
Thank you for having me.
We get to listen to one another's episodes all the time, and we're, kind of back and forth over text and email about the podcast, but it is a treat to actually book some time to catch up with one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we thought that we would use our, season recap, check-in to talk a little bit about Canada-U.S. relations, and you're in Colorado and I'm in Niagara, and we're on different sides of what is suddenly a trade war. So we thought that we would talk about those different perspectives and how we're navigating it with our faith communities, all of those things. But I thought that before we got into some of those more, political updates, that we might just do a bit of a personal check-in, because Loren, you've had some things going on in your life, some vocational transitions and stuff. Do you want to share with our listeners what has been happening for you?
Yeah. Well, I tried to hint at this, I think, in the past, hoping that there would be I've talked about how carrying Future Christian through several jobs or a few jobs, and I hinted at I hope there'd be a fourth or fifth transition to carry it through. So I'm fortunate to hopefully be doing that here through a new transition. So I'm going to be working kind of it's hard to think what the correct terminology would be, but I guess I'll call it like a multi-vocational role centered around church and ministry, I suppose. So I'll be working part-time as a hospital chaplain, part-time for a ministry nonprofit that supports worship leaders and church leaders, and then also for another small role for a local nonprofit that's trying to help churches develop land for affordable housing. So really excited about these things. Obviously represents a big transition for me and my family, but something that's been helpful for me as I've kind of been through a period of discernment, so to speak, trying to figure out what to do with my life, is I've found some clarity with the understanding that, I still feel called to the church, to serve the church, and some recognition, that doesn't mean that I have to have a certain title, right? I don't have to have the title of pastor to be fulfilling my calling. And I think that's been a helpful discernment for me.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And that does sound like, it sounds like a juggling act,
Right.
To be clear, because I would imagine that any of those roles could be on the all-consuming side of things. But to me, when you describe that sounds like a really good, combination of your skill sets and gifts and, the experience that you would bring to the table. So I hope it feels really life-giving to be moving into that combination of things.
Nerve-wracking for sure, but life-giving in many ways. Even when I did some orientation at the hospital with the staff chaplain, it's funny, I talked to him about his job, and he's like, do you want a similar role? I'm like, not really. The kind of person I am, the thought of having a 9 to 5, just doing the same monotony is not really my jam. But also I just had an experience yesterday or the day before outside a hospital where I had this like mini pastoral care moment, and it was just so profound. And like, we text a little bit about this, right, Martha, or at least exchange, I think, on socials about that. Like, there's something so profound and holy about, pastoral care moments.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like addicting, I think, to me.
Yeah, and I think, like, I have a variety of friends who have transitioned from, leading churches into other kinds of ministries and expressions of ministry. And it is like so important to look beyond the language because, like if God is calling you to ministry appears.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't need the labels.
I'm wondering this, Martha, what are your thoughts on this? Because I've been thinking about this lately. It seems like at the 5 or 10 year mark for pastors, a lot of folks, I don't know, it seems like for men, especially around like 40. I don't know if that's just me, a few others I've seen. I don't know if it's like up for your neck of the woods, but it seems like pastors, like, they either like drop out the ministry entirely, they go to work for like sort of like what I'm doing, like a parachurch, ministry, nonprofit, whatever word you want to use, or they just like keep going. Like, what have you seen? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, certainly men and women of all ages, like the dropout rate is significant.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think in the cohort ahead of my husband, so he was ordained like a year and a half ahead of me, and the cohort before him, like by the time I was in ministry, like none of them were left. Like all of them had just realized like that it wasn't for them. And we like lots of statistics around the dropout rates through COVID and since
Right.
COVID. But at the same time, like I have heard lots of people kind of name that post 40 into your 50s ministry zone, which I'm just in now, as like being quite fruitful,
Mm-hmm.
if you stay, and it definitely is they're just like different possibilities that open up when you're not in the mode of trying to establish yourself and prove yourself. And I sure found like in my 20s and early 30s, like the need to like prove that I deserved to be there was really high. And I think there were kind of all sorts of ways in which I acted like such a know-it-all. I don't know how people could stand being around me, honestly, but
Same, yeah. Yeah.
So it's nice to be able to let that go a little bit. You can lean into all the things you don't know.
Yeah. I'm wondering too, I'm thinking back to one of my way past guests, Ferguson and Packard, who talked about, I think it was in their book, about this need for like different, or I think as they described it, it was like this idea that like culturally, like the only way to become like a faith leader is through like traditional parish ordination. And it's like a situation that I've recognized even right now. Like there's like this Christian nonprofit forming in my neck of the woods that's really based on like a social service type model, sprinkled in with a faith foundation. But they're like, what do we call you as, Loren?
Yeah.
Former pastor. So I think in some ways, like, that's why I've liked having this chaplain role, because I can say like, hey, I still have some clergy status. How else do you define yourself as a clergy or faith leader when you don't have that pastor of XYZ church?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is such a thing. And it's a thing that we're going to have to figure out more and more because like there are just going to be so many more non-traditional forms of ministry, and we're going to have people come out of seminaries who are not going to lead churches. So something for us to, I think the language has got to evolve a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any other big updates about, I guess that is probably all consuming at the moment, getting your feet wet in the new configuration?
Yeah. I guess I should tease this, right? So we were just talking about it. Like Martha and I are planning to connect in person in June, I think. So I'm excited about that. Looking forward to taking a trip with my wife, and we'll connect in person as part of that.
Yeah, I think that it is long overdue. You know, we've been working together on this for quite a while now, and it's a passion project for both of us. And we have never seen one another in 3 dimensions, so
Right.
it's going to be great. And, you know, my husband is from Niagara. He is excited to show you around.
Yeah.
There's some great wineries and lots of local history, and hopefully the weather will be good, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm going to be on sabbatical at that time.
Okay,
so
you can party.
I can party. Yeah, I'm planning on really living it up on Saturday nights through the coming months.
I will say that's like one thing I don't miss about, church ministry is now on Saturdays, I'm always like wanting to text my friends and be like, oh, I maybe shouldn't because they're trying to get in the zone for Sunday.
Yeah. I always tell people that when I retire, I'm going to be a Saturday party animal.
Yeah.
That's like my goal.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it would be helpful from my perspective, and I'm guessing from our Canadian listeners, to just get a bit of an American perspective on how the pretty significant deterioration of relationship between our countries is being perceived and talked about from over there. And certainly I can share with you some of what's going on here. But, you elected a new president in November. Like, how is the political landscape shaking down since then, just generally?
Well, let me first start with something lighthearted, because this was a month ago now, right? The NHL Four Nations hockey tournament.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, that was so much fun as a sports guy who really enjoys like watching a game where I really don't have a real strong dog in the fight, but also like the game's got some juice to it, to use a metaphor. And my goodness, the USA-Canada games had some juice to it. So I owe Martha an adult beverage when we connect in June, because we put a friendly bet on the USA-Canada, championship game, I think it was. So that was, my goodness, from a sporting perspective, a lot of fun just to kind of see that juice and see those players play so hard. From a more serious perspective, I think it's been kind of heartbreaking and disorienting, all the things you want to say, to see. I mean, I think about, we're neighbors, and I'm sure, like many Canadians and Americans, we know people from each other's nation, and I think it's sad to see this unnecessary, unhelpful, I mean, whatever language you want to use, that's succumb, and for whatever reason, there doesn't seem to be, I don't know, I'm at a loss for words, I guess.
Yeah.
Say.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, and I appreciate like the emotion of what you're saying as well. I read a New Yorker article, I think it was last week, that said, like Americans don't particularly think about Canadians except when they don't like an election outcome and then they talk about moving to Canada.
Right.
But it's different in Canada. I mean, in Canada, we do think about our American neighbors all the time. And it's not just because like we're living next to the world's biggest superpower. It's also because like we're constantly consuming American media and American music and American television and American products. Like we, the whole world consumes so much of American culture, right? And then we're living right next door to the US. As you say, like, I have family who live in the States. I have colleagues who live in the States. I have people in my congregation who are American. We have enjoyed this relationship with America that maybe hasn't been completely like balanced. Again, like we know we're a small country, population wise and economically compared to the States, but it has evolved as a very like intertwined, interconnected relationship. And it feels personal. Like it feels personal, to have it suddenly so severely compromised. Like I would really liken it to a divorce. It's like we're trying to like separate into two separate households. We're trying to, what was the Gwyneth Paltrow, strategic uncoupling or?
Yes, something to that effect.
It wasn't strategic. It was conscious uncoupling. Yes. But like, it also hurts. Like it obviously there's like just tons of, worry economically, and that goes for every single person on the planet right now with the stock markets going up and down and threats of recession and, even talk of like a depression, like this kind of being like the next major depression.
That's where things get really scary.
They get really scary. Yeah. And yet at the same time, like it's also just that profound hurt of like, we thought that we were in this together and now like our politicians, we're in the middle of an election. We're electing a new prime minister at the end of this month. And, the ballot box question has now become like tariffs and Trump. And our leaders who are running for prime minister, most of them are kind of saying like things will never be the same. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Like it's such an unforced error. Like there's no reason for it. Like we had a good relationship and, I also very much enjoyed our little wager over the hockey game, and I really love a sports bandwagon that I can climb on when things get exciting. I'm not like a year-round sports fan, but I can get really into a game. But I will tell you, like, it felt like we had a real, like, dog in that fight. Like, like the stakes were very high in Canada because, like, we needed a morale boost. It just, has felt like we have been, bullied for like no reason by the people we thought were, our friends and partners.
Yeah. It's interesting how you share that perspective as a Canadian, because I think it speaks to something those of us in the United States are just so unaware of, and that they're kind of cultural, to use a big word, hegemony, right?
Yeah.
Cultural dominance. Like it's just like the water we're swimming in. So we don't think about like how much of the world is impacted by our media and our economics and our soft power, so to speak. And it does, even beyond the political, I can't help but think, even to church and Christianity, like I wonder what will be like the impact in church world, like the correlation or collaboration or now lack thereof, perhaps, because there's such U.S. dominance in the culture, worldwide culture. What do you think?
I mean, I have never seen anything like it in Canada. And if there is a silver lining in all of this, it is the exceptional sort of intentional investment in what it is to be Canadian in a way that I have never experienced in my lifetime. I mean, Canadians are like famously sort of apologetic, and that goes for like just our basic identity. Like we can just kind of be apologetic about not being American or not being as big as America or as influential or whatever. And suddenly like there's just such an investment in Canadian content and supporting Canadian business and Canadian products and Canadian storytelling and Canadian music and just like reevaluating how much good there actually is here in a way that is very easy to not think about, because again, we just sort of, it's the water we swim in too, that you turn on Netflix and you watch American programming.
Right.
Like it's like I watch American reality shows, reality TV shows. I don't watch a ton of Canadian content, but that like clarity around just, okay, if we care about being a sovereign nation, then let's act like it. And I imagine that to maybe a lesser degree that's going on all around the world, because suddenly everybody's impacted by tariff announcements and a sense of like nobody particularly being off the hook, certainly for more than a few days at a time. So sorry.
I was sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say, I think it's interesting. Like there's similar, like it thinks to me, I think of like there's not so much boycotting of certain companies, although certainly Tesla is their numbers are suffering because of the radioactivity around Musk, for good reason, if I can be frank. But it does seem like a good step forward to think, what can I control? Like I can control where my dollars go or my finances go, or where I'm investing my time and resources. I'm also thinking, Martha, and I think this is especially true, at least in some of the things that I've seen. Like I loved that clip. I think it was you sent me, or I saw, of like Carney and who's the Mike Myers, right? Like, great, like good clip, propaganda commercial. But of like, there's kind of this theory that like people don't have any values other than money. Like, I think that's like, I was listening to another non-religious podcast the other day and saying like in America, like the number one value is people's economics, their dollars. Like what's gonna, like, that's why the swing voters voted for Trump, because they thought like he's going to impact my wallet the most financially.
Well, they were right. Like he certainly is impacting their wallet, but maybe not in the way they had hoped.
The way they expected.
Oh my gosh.
There's Martha with a burn. But Martha, you're demonstrating like people have other values. Like, I mean, Greenland, right? Like that's a whole thing similar. Like, oh, U.S. wants to take over Greenland, and Greenland's like, no, no thanks, we're good. Like, you're talking about it yourself, like this kind of like pride of this national pride of like that goes beyond like dollars and cents. And I feel like if I can go philosophical here, like that's, I think, the biggest problem I think in America is several people point out like the number one moniker or identification thing people will say about themselves in America is based on their political ideology. Like, I'm a Democrat first. I'm a Republican first. I'm a progressive first. Like, to me, like when I talk, what's my number one moniker? Like, I'm a Christian. I'm a father. I'm a husband.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily in that order, but like my political ideology, I would not put that, gosh, in the top 5, top 10. So do you think like that's a big cultural not missing point, but what am I trying to say? Something certain leaders in my nation are not accounting for.
Is like
that people have a value other than just like money as their number one. Their value of either money or their political ideology is like their number one identity. Like you mentioned for Canadians, like people are rallying around their national pride, right?
Yeah. I think, I mean, the sense in Canada, and again, like this is our sense. I'm sure that the reporting is quite different there, but the sense in Canada is that the trade war was initiated legitimately with the hope that Canada would succumb to economic pressure and become the 51st state, because Canada is extremely rich in very valuable natural resources and critical minerals that are going to become ever more essential in the years ahead. That like the talk of the 51st state and our prime minister becoming a governor, that was more than just sort of like needling, that there was a hope that this we would fold, right?
It seems like whenever there's like, oh, I'm just joking kind of language, there's always some truth behind it. Yeah.
And like the narrative in Canada anyway is that like, don't underestimate us. Like
right.
our national hashtag at the moment is elbows up. And like, that's a hockey term as I understand it.
Explain that for our non-Canadian listeners.
Yeah, well, and I kind of have to explain it as a non-hockey person to people because I had to look it up. But like, it is a hockey term of like sort of defiance, right? Like of aggression. And like, you're going to come at us like elbows up, like we're not buckling. We're not, as you said, like, okay, you can apply financial pressure, but don't expect that we're going to just like fold into the United States. We do actually have a country and an identity that we care about profoundly. And it has been, I would not like by any means say that any of this is good, but it is an upside for Canada to just be really clear about feeling good about being Canadian.
Right.
Yeah. I'm interested in what gets said in pulpits, especially from mainline progressive Christians. Obviously, there was the really big moment of Bishop Marianne Buddy. I think her last name is pronounced Buddy. Speaking like truth to power, and I thought in such a gracious way, just calling for mercy. I have had a couple of sermons here at St. George's, and my colleague Tom has had some sermons as well. I always run through my sermon with my son before I preach on a Sunday morning, and twice he has reacted to the sermon by saying, like, are you sure that you want to be that political? And like, to me, I don't think I'm being political. I think I'm speaking to like people's anxieties and like what people are talking about and worrying about and caring about right now. Like, I'm not trying to throw down the gauntlet politically. I'm just trying to speak to what I'm hearing and people are feeling. But like, it does end up with, sermons that talk about the realities of Trump and US-Canada relations and stuff. Like, is there similar messaging happening in American pulpits?
I think when I was talking about Bishop Buddy's sermon with my friends who are all like actively preaching regularly, they appreciated what she had to say, but were also thinking like, boy, it might be harder. Like her, depending on the polity, right? Like the congregational polity, for instance, in a lot of denominations or a few denominations in the States is such like if you anger the congregants, like they can run you out of town. So there's some like hesitancy about like this pressure to be like, oh, we should all be like Bishop Buddy and like speak truth to power because like some of us could lose our jobs. That being said, I think there's a big admiration for her and what she said and just the guts to do that. And I think that line of preaching is really valuable. I'm thinking, again, I'm not preaching regularly, but even in the church I attend, a couple of weeks ago, a sermon was given about based on Psalms. I can't remember the Psalm specifically. And I think the church that I would attend would broadly be looked at as more purplish, if that makes sense, like kind of middle has Republicans and Democrats. Okay. But like this, the guy who's speaking gave a sermon and he made the point like leaders, whether they're church leaders, whether they're political leaders, like you have to care about people. And like that seems like a pretty basic sermon.
Yeah.
But also like it's kind of like political these days. Like you can't not care about individuals. And I think like similarly, like Bishop Buddy said, like have mercy on these people. Like I think that's an approach because I don't know. I mean, like, let's be honest too about this, Martha. Like, I don't know if you've seen this, like there's this big movement, amongst some conservative Christians about like saying empathy is a sin, which is just preposterous to me. So
oh
like,
my gosh.
Yeah, even there's some pushback about like, it's troubling. I mean, it is. I mean, I think that's what's most troubling is just how callousness and carelessness has become like the rule of the day. I think that's what's most heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, it seems like we're setting the bar extremely low just to say like, okay, mercy is a gospel quality. Like that seems like a bar that we should all be able to get across, right? Like that's really worrisome if that is considered too divisive.
Yeah.
We were having a conversation at Parish Council about sending a letter of support to Bishop Buddy just to say, we're grateful for your words and we're praying for you in like any pushback that you're experiencing. And it was, a really nice letter that somebody on our ministry team crafted, and we just wanted to be able to sign it as a parish council. And there were some people just like a little concerned, like we don't want to be divisive. We don't want people to feel like if they have a different view politically that they can't that they're kind of being ostracized or whatever. And we felt like the letter was not framed in a way that was divisive, that it was just kind of speaking to basic core gospel values. And one of the elders of our congregation, he just said, like, this is a time for courage, and like, all of us need to get ready to use our voices to speak up for what we know is right. And everybody signed the letter. Like, it was quite stirring, but it's not to diminish that that it can feel really complicated trying to navigate that.
Yeah, and I suppose speaking to some of those shared values can be helpful. Like, I'm thinking, like, my elected representative, who I disagree with on many points, to be vague. I've been trying to communicate with him, when I send him a letter or make a phone call. It seems like every week or every couple of weeks, right? Like, on his social media bios, like, the first thing it says is, like, Christian.
Interesting.
So I'll just be like, listen, there's 3 things we should all be to agree on. Humans are made in the image of God. Christ died for all. God loves all. Like,
yeah,
we can agree on that. Can we treat our fellow human beings, especially if you claim to be a Christian, from that working foundation?
Yeah, like, that seems like just such an important, like, common ground to claim. And you said you haven't gotten any response?
I mean, just the kind of standard form letter response emails. So we'll see. I mean, it's complicated, right? Who knows? And because I don't want to, I feel like my perspective is that any kind of real harsh thing is just going to be, like, tuned out, as the classic, like, oh, there's just some angry liberal.
I know.
Let's ignore him. So I'm thinking, like, what's a way that I can communicate in a way that speaks in a way that he'll listen, but also, like, won't just be tuned out as liberal talking points, so to speak.
Yeah, I know. I think that's really important. Like, when we're talking across political divides, is trying to establish that common ground. And, in lots of ways, like, I think that, like, pastors are uniquely positioned to theoretically be able to do that because, we're constantly speaking to a very mixed crowd of people who come from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different perspectives and ages and stages and affiliations and so on. And yeah, you want to lay claim to, okay, here are the things that unite us rather than divide us. But then it does feel like some of those basics are maybe a step too far at the moment.
Yeah, which is very sad.
Yeah. I've been obviously, like, giving a lot of thought to how to minister to people in times of such significant anxiety, and the anxiety is really high in Canada right now, and I think it is in the States as well for lots of people. And in some ways, I think that being in the midst of a crisis does give clarity of purpose. Like, there is this sort of like COVID, like, there is this reality that we're all trying to navigate, and, like, speaking to that is really important, whether it's from the pulpit or elsewhere. One of the one of the things that has been really important in my faith community right now is music. We have like a Wednesday night service gathering once a month that is sort of around like more popular expressions of music and a hot topic kind of thing. And so last week we had songs to celebrate Canada, and we picked a handful of songs that people in our band who were putting the music together felt like really represented some great Canadian storytelling. And then from that, we're now like planning a citywide Great Canadian Sing-Along just to bring people together to like sing the most iconic Canadian songs. And like that is not going to be a religious night, but it is like so very much based in religious principles of of like building people up and coming together as a community in the midst of crisis, and looking for expressions of unity and clarity of telling our story, and like choosing community rather than division. Like I think that those are things that the church should be offering in times like this. Like, what kind of spiritual resources do you see people drawing on, or like where do you think people are kind of getting their ground under them spiritually?
That's a good question. I've been thinking about what I've been trying to do lately as I officiate high school sports. So high school lacrosse season right now. So every time the national anthem is played, I just try to pray during the entire national anthem for our nation, for our leaders, for their hearts to be changed, those kind of things. I think getting back to what you were saying similarly about like in Canada, people thinking about like, what do they value? What can they control? I think those are really good kind of foundational points to build from. And I'm trying to think about examples because I think, again, to get partisan here for a moment, like the Democrats in America have been like floundering for like 2 or 3 months. And I think there's still some kind of floundering. And it goes back to something you said. Like, I think part of the problem, I think, with the Democratic messaging in the 2024 election was this like idea of like, oh, let's just go back. Like, we're just going to keep going back to normal. And I think something that the current president has been able to take advantage of, I would say for ill, is this idea that like, especially since 2016, but of course since 2020, it's like there's no normal to go back to. Like, things have fundamentally changed. And I think that's like the biggest problem and the biggest thing I want to see more from leaders in my nation from the other side is like, okay, it's not just that we're going to stop being terrible people and not care about human beings, but like, what are we going to be for ourselves? So that's like the most, like when I'm seeing things like that, like that's what I'm most appreciative of, especially within the church, of like, how are we defining ourselves in a positive light, talking about what we're about, what we're for, how we're contributing to our communities. Like, that's what I think really intrigues me, and I hope to see more of. Because I think, like you said, like there's no going back to normal. Like even if in 2 years, like in the States and the Congress changes, even in 3 years, a new administration comes in, like there's still gonna be like, no, like we're not gonna just press a reset button. So how can we live into our values going forward?
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think like in my calmest and most charitable frame of mind, like I recognize that the polarization of opinion and politics that is very much happening in your neck of the woods in the States,
Yeah.
but also happens here in Canada, like that there is a real need to interrogate that and like understand what the deep issues are that have left people feeling so disenfranchised that they are willing to
Right.
take an extreme route, right? So
Yeah.
I think unless you take that seriously going forward, any leader is going to
Mm-hmm.
end up maybe like just further amplifying those divisions, right?
I want to speak to this in a different way because I'm reading right now Andrew Root's new book, Evangelism in the Age of Despair. And his big point, spoiler alert, is basically like our culture is just incredibly sad. And he makes this really sort of shocking point that I'd never thought about. He's like, we're so sad and so disconnected that we have to pay people. Like he's talking about like BetterHelp. I don't know if that's a thing in Canada. But he's like, we're so sad and we're so disconnected that we can't find anybody to share in our sorrow other than paying someone.
Yeah.
Which is just heartbreaking. And I think like I'm sparked by what you said, Martha, about recognizing people's pain. Like we've got to enter into people's sorrow, as Root would say it. And that's a profoundly spiritual, faithful act, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And like we do have resources as people of faith for doing that, for talking about that. Yeah. I think that I'm really going to ponder that, and I'll need to read Andrew Root's new book too. Okay, so let's wrap up on a more lighthearted note. What are some non-spiritual resources that are getting you through these days, Loren?
I mean, I'm being very active, getting my steps in every day.
Yeah.
Walking the dogs. Like I said before we started recording, cleaning house a lot, keeping the house in order. I'm a big schedule person, so I am scheduling the heck out of my life now because it just makes me feel less scattered if I know what's coming up and what I'm doing. But I think like controlling what we can control. For me, I'm trying to control what I can control.
Yeah.
Thinking about, again, what I really value in life. Like part of my work decision was like, I want to see my kid more. I want to see my kids more. And like 2 nights this week, I've walked to the park with my son to kick the soccer ball around for 10 minutes.
Yeah, those are the things that you definitely want to be prioritizing. Yeah, I have like kind of similar resources that I draw on, like a lot of running, a lot of walking. I do not clean the house, but I was saying to you before we went on air that I do find myself puttering in the kitchen mostly. I mean, I do really enjoy baking and cooking because I like to eat so much, but I also like being able to putter in the kitchen and listen to podcast after podcast after podcast. And being in an election cycle right now, there's just like such an embarrassment of riches of political podcasts to consume every day. So that in a weird way just helps me feel more centered about life to kind of listen to what smart people are saying about the political landscape.
Yeah.
I'm really into watching Survivor these days with my son. And I think going back to what you said about like that hockey game last month, it is just fun to watch like people duking it out in a competition where the stakes are just about money. Like it's not about money and being on TV. It's not about like destroying lives or upending the world order or anything like that.
just that little thing.
Yeah, just that little thing. Okay.
I've got to ask for our American listeners, like, what are some like classic Canadian songs that I'm not a big music guy, but what are some classic Canadian songs we could jam off on Spotify, Spotify or like that? What would you say?
Well, I mean,
What are
there's
a handful that come to
obviously
mind?
like the big Canadian exports, like the ones who have become like international
Right.
stars. So, Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen and Sarah McLachlan and Shania Twain and Celine Dion and kind of all of those like really big internationally recognized
Okay.
like leaders in the music industry. But, if you want like kind of more niche Canadiana, then I would recommend listening to the Tragically Hip.
The Tragically Hip. I think I've heard of them.
The Tragically Hip. The lead singer died a couple of years ago, but they are just like so famous for being like really kind of documenting Canadian storytelling and like they're like my generation's kind of major band from the 1990s. Like they were part of the whole alt rock like movement. And like Gordon Lightfoot would be like a generation before that. Again, somebody who just like really, really documented Canadian storytelling and Canadiana. We've got lots of like Kathleen Edwards is such a great singer-songwriter. There's a long list that I could give you of just great Canadian singer-songwriters, but and bands and so on. But those would be like the ones that are top of the list when we're talking about the stuff that everybody in Canada would feel like they have a stake in some of those names.
There's a band that I like to listen to occasionally, Metric. I think they're Canadian.
Oh, yeah.
Them?
My daughter and I are seeing them in May.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're really, really big Metric fans. I wouldn't say that they're extremely popular with like a generation, but I wouldn't say that their songs are like kind of well known across the whole Canadian landscape. And my daughter was really surprised to even find out that they're Canadian, but they are Canadian and they're amazing. We're excited about Metric.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we, I was thinking we should maybe pray for one another's countries and leaders as we wrap up the podcast today. So do you want me to lead off?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let us pray. God of peace and guiding light, thank you for the gift of this conversation. Thank you for people who continue to show up to listen and talk and wrestle and discern. And thank you for opportunities and space to delve more deeply into the dynamics of our lives. I pray for the United States, for their leaders, for their people, for peace and community and love to lead the way. I pray that the gospel qualities of mercy and respect for the dignity of every human being will prevail. And where there is division, I pray that you grant healing and unity. And where there is distress, I pray that you guide the way forward in ways that bring blessing and help and prosperity to everyone.
Lord, I pray for the nation and people of Canada. as we are in, and they are feeling especially the turmoil and tumult of so much change and disruption in systems and patterns. I pray for their leadership, give them wisdom and discernment as they guide their country. I pray for their people, help them to make wise decisions as they especially choose for an upcoming election. I pray that you'd guide their hearts and minds to do justice and to love mercy, and as Martha spoke to be gospel-centered in their actions. I pray just for them to be good neighbors and similarly the United States people too. Thank you for the history of our two nations. Help us to recognize and repent of our failings and our faults, and to live and move forward in a more godly and just way, I pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, Loren, I think that texting and emailing aside, the next time that we have like a fulsome conversation with one another is probably going to be in person.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. And
it's coming up quick.
It's coming up quick, and we can let our future Christian community know about that. I'm sure that we'll have some pictures and updates to post on social media, and that'll be exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, have a great rest of your day, and may God's peace be with you.
God's peace be with you as well. Okay.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Loren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.